Hello and welcome back to my channel. This week I'm going to show you how I created an inspired Gothic dress. I saw this image of a dress that they called the Gothic wedding dress and I wanted to recreate it in my own style. However, I was going to invert the colors with it primarily black with white trim, but I did not like the way it looked, so I went with black on black. The first thing I did was I purchased 15 yards of this black lining material and 15 yards of some black chiffon and 1 yard of rhinestone and embroidered lace. With the main skirt, it's going to be 4 layers, 2 layers of this black lining and 2 layers of chiffon. Each layer of the skirt is 5 yards, and I gathered the waist down to what I needed it, with most of the fabric in the back. For the hemming of the lining material, I just serged the edges since it's going to be hidden underneath the chiffon. And to secure the gathering, I went ahead and stitched the top of it. And I did this to each layer of the skirt. For the waistband of the skirt, I have this sturdy cotton material that I cut a 6-inch band from, folded it in half, and I did fuse it with interfacing. Once I had the interfacing fused to it, I folded it in half and ironed it down and created a seam, and then I flipped one side up about a 1/2 inch and ironed that down as well. And the other side that I did not fold up, I went ahead and I pinned it to the top of the skirt and stitched it to the front of the skirt. I did make sure that the waistband overlapped itself because that will have the hooks and eyes on it. Once the waistband is connected to the front, I do pin and fold and pin the waistband down over those raw edges and then stitch it down. With the waistband attached, I go ahead and put 2 hooks and eyes over for the closure. Apparently I did not hit record and film this part, but I folded some satin ribbon in half, ironed it down, and then I wrapped it around the raw edges of the chiffon and sewed it down. With the skirt construction done, I go ahead and I gather certain areas of each layer of the chiffon up because later on I will be hand stitching some embroidered appliques over it. And the skirt is done. Now it's time to go ahead and work on the bottom. In a previous video, I made the pattern for the bodice when I made my stretch denim corset. That is the pattern I used to make this bodice. And this corset bodice is actually 4 layers. It has a sturdy cotton material for the layer that goes next to the skin. It's got a layer in the middle of it with the boning. It's got this satining lining material, and it's also got a chiffon layer over the top of it. And actually there's 5 layers because then there's the embroidered appliques on top of it. And if you want to check out how I made the pattern, I will leave a link down below in the description box. Plus I'll leave the iCard above. With all the layers cut out, I go ahead and assemble them together. With the bodice pieces assembled, I go ahead and take the one that's going to be holding the boning, and I mark 1/2 inch from the bottom, and I mark another 1/2 inch from the top. That way I know where my bones need to end and begin. And for the boning channels, I just use that same satin ribbon that I bound the edges of the chiffon skirt in as my boning channels. I do put 2 boning channels on each seam. And with the bones, I just use zip ties, large ones that I got from Lowe's. And I cut them down and curve the edges so they don't poke through the fabric. Once all the boning channels are in and all the bones are in, I go ahead and put a stitch on the top to close all those channels up. And then I go ahead and I attach 3 layers of the bodice together. That's the boning layer, that's the lining layer that goes next to the skin, and the satin material. And with those 3 layers sewn together, I go ahead and I fold the edges of the bodice in on itself next to the bone, and I do create a modesty panel to go on the back side of it as well. And here's the modesty panel, and I do fuse it with some interfacing so that way it has some structure and doesn't flop everywhere. For the closure of this bodice, I do use grommets. I use 7 on each side and long black ribbon. To bind the edges of this bodice, I go ahead and with the 3 layers I have sewn, I go ahead and I bind it with the same black ribbon I used to bind the edges of the chiffon. With those 3 layers done and bound, I go ahead and create the chiffon layer, and then I decide the placement of the embroidered applique. And I sew the chiffon layers just like I did the other layers. Most of this bodice with the chiffon was trial and error, so there was quite a bit that I did not film. But once the chiffon layer was done, I go ahead and place it on the bodice itself, and I do hand stitch it down. And then I decide how I want the appliques to lay on the bottom. Once I like the placement, I go ahead and hand stitch them down. I also hand stitch the appliques on the skirt as well. Here I'm just cutting the excess of the chiffon. With this bodice, it does have off the shoulder sleeves and a long chiffon bell sleeves to it. This was all just a makeup trial and error kind of thing. All I did was cut long rectangles in the length I want, and then I curved the edges of it. And I cut these off the shoulder bits out of these heavy duty cotton with a lining layer of the satiny material and a chiffon layer. The sleeves, I cut 2 layers of the satiny and 1 layer of the chiffon, and then the bell sleeves themselves is just 1 layer of chiffon that I bound with the black ribbon. And the off the shoulder bits and the sleeve portion also got the appliques hand sewed to them as well. And I also cut interfacing for the off the shoulder bits. With the bell sleeve portion, all it is 2 long rectangles that I ripped off the chiffon. With the off the shoulder portion, I fused interfacing to the cotton material, and then I sewed on a layer of the satin material and then the chiffon, and then turned it right side out. For the sleeve, upper sleeve portion of the sleeve, I took 2 layers of the satiny material, put chiffon over the top of it, and sewed it on it. And with these upper sleeves, they did get the edges serged on them because I was not binding them and I didn't want the raw edges showing. And with the bell sleeves portion, the chiffon was bound with that black ribbon. And then I attached it to the bottom of the sleeve. I did gather the chiffon down before I attached it to the bottom of the sleeve. With the off the shoulder bits and the bell sleeves sewn together, I go ahead and place it on the bodice, and I do hand stitch the off the shoulder bits to the bodice itself. The bell sleeves themselves only got tacked down to the off the shoulder bits on the outside. If I attached them to the bodice itself, it would limit the range of movement. And here is the final dress. I think it came out really pretty, and it's actually not for me. I am actually giving it to one of my friends as a birthday present. Personally, this is not my style, but this is hers, and she would wear this grocery shopping. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next week.